Boom, hello, it's me, Joel Clark, guy who made Lone Wolf Fists, among other things. And soon to be guy who made Lone Wolf Fists Acid&Steel, the very first supplement. So I'm getting pretty stoked about it. So, I spent the last couple of weeks mostly just working my actual, day job, you know. But in addition to that, boom, I've been doing some of the on-paper design. I want to make sure everybody's catching up with this one because it's a lot of design. I learned from the last Kickstarter and designing the last game that, I need to write it down. I need to kind of see the shape of something before I go and start trying to type it on the computer. Otherwise, I just sit at the screen and just stare at it forever. I got some drawings up here from a friend. And there's that. Yeah, you can see Ravana's got his style on that page. Just gonna throw that right into the microphone. That's cool. That's fine that happened. Alright, this is what I'm doing right now. I got Yama here, and you can see I've got their powers kind of categorized. I don't know. Actually, how good is that coming through? Anyway, let me just put some light on this shit here. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, you can kind of see that, yeah, I've got their powers categorized in, three different general themes that I feel like kind of encompass them. And, I've got those tiered by power level. So, this is a good way to kind of keep a cohesive sort of theming throughout the power structure of a given style. And this is one of the first ones I tried to do. I was trying to do something clever with the way all these were sitting together. Because I found whenever I was designing Nirvana, and the reason I wanted to design one to completion before going to the next one was because you don't know what you don't know, right? Until you've made one of these things to completion, you don't know what problems you're going to have. And I found that I got stuck on a couple of key points with Nirvana. Like, for example, I have 2 blocks of 6 techniques and then 2 blocks of 3 techniques, right? So the problem with that is if you get a thematic set of 6 things and you develop that for 2 tiers, you then have this choke point where, half of them are going to get crowded out and you're only going to get 3 techniques to take to completion. There's also the consideration that at least 1/3 of your 3 master and ultimate technique or master and supreme techniques are going to be turning into landscape. They're going to be different versions of that. So a good third of the entirety of the design kind of has to funnel into that. I didn't get that initially. Also, because these things are supposed to be very complete beings, you don't really have a ton of choice in what develops at the higher levels. You really do need, in master level techniques, to almost always have an attack that hits multiple targets and a defense that is a shield and is persistent against multiple targets. That's just how the game's designed. Once you get to master level, you need to be able to defend yourself and you need to be able to hit hard. Now, in the core game, I wasn't quite as restricted with this because a given style can not do that, but as long as one of the 2 styles that a clan can offer you does that, then you can dip wherever you need to go. And even beyond that, you don't even necessarily need to do it within a clan. You could just have members of that clan go and find a technique that worked at the master supreme level. Well, especially the master level, not really so much supreme, but at the master level that gave them something that they were missing within one of their native styles. And I don't believe I did that. I'm pretty sure all of the styles, or all all of the clans have within their 2 styles, more specifically, the full offense and defense suite that's offered by master level techniques. Because when you get right down to it, what you really have, again, is 12 novice level techniques, and then 6 expert, 6 master, and then 2 supreme in a given clan. So with these guys, their styles are a conglomeration, such as that you can just use this one style to get all the way. You don't need to branch out into one of the other Asura to get all the powers that you need. Theoretically, each one of these Asura almost exclusively uses these techniques, and the power is in their ultimate form. So that those were interesting little design things that I hadn't really seen the shape of until I ran into them, and I was like, oh, Okay, well, that's actually a lot more restrictive than I thought it was going to be. Um, so, and what came out as I was designing all of these is I kept realizing that, like, the way I did Ravana really, it developed him well. Because one of the things that's interesting about these Ashura is that they become titans. They become these tremendous things, as their styles develop. So the earlier ones, like master level and below, are for the most part pretty much kung fu. There's a few in the master level that dip a toe into transhumanism, and a couple in novice level that do too. That give you kind of cool, like demonic powers. But once you start pushing into master level, like once you start getting past expert into master level, you really get the transhuman stuff like ranking up really really fast. So turning into a titan and turning into landscape could be done both physically and also have like a thematic impact on earlier techniques. This is stuff I didn't like. I kind of suspected it, but I didn't know it until I had it in front of me and I had something designed. Um, so yeah, yeah. So I did Ravana. I got him done, and then I started doing these guys. So here's Yama, who I started designing before I was done with Ravana, and then I've got Yamato no Orochi, who I designed very recently, actually. He's one of the more recent designs. And you can tell that I refined the technique a lot between these two, because this is the first one I did purely on paper, is Yama. And you can tell I'm trying to do some stuff with the boxes and like conceptually blocking it out. And this, I've just like, no, I kind of know what I need of the different tiers, and I have brief descriptions of things. And I've also got like, what did these techniques do? I've got stuff with the form. To give that a little progress, and the form is very developed. I wanted the form to be basically done when it was on paper. The more powerful techniques, some of them are pretty well developed. If I have a kind of an idea that I wanted to sink my teeth into on paper before I started writing it. Like, actually, Yamato no Orochi is cool because he has a kind of a gambling element to some of his techniques. Let me see if I can find one. He can detect sins, which is cool. Let's see, where is it? Which one is it that does it? Pierce defense. Oh, I can't find it now. That makes me sad. I think it's the dodge strike. Yeah, +1 attack, -1 effort, or 1d10 defense. Oh yeah, that's the one. Okay, so yeah, the strike. I really like the way this strike works. So the idea is that you have this like, and I was basing this off snake style, where you've got your hands up like that, and you're kind of like trying to penetrate in. That style is interesting because you're using two hands, and they're like, usually whenever I see hands up in a martial art, I either see one out and ahead, or I see like two up where they're like defensive and you have this kind of wall in front of you. So like it's the boxing style, and this is more of like the Tai Chi or the dragon style, right? Or Southern Mantis does that too. But like snake style has this interesting thing where they're up and they're both, like the heads of a snake, and you can use one for distraction while the other one strikes, or you can do a feint and then strike. And like there's all, and you can strike with both of them. And like the way they use them is really interesting. They're kind of meant to sort of hook in, and instead of focusing in a knuckle, which is where a lot of traditional martial arts will focus a lot of their kinetic force, they focus it like in this sort of like this like pinchy pokey sort of thing. And it's interesting because that can still be effective, like getting your fingers up in like an armpit or something could really or a throat or an eyeball. Like the Southern American style of martial arts, so they can like hook you with their thumbs and stuff like that. You see a lot of that. Like it's a kind of a nasty fighting style, and I like that. So I wanted to preserve that within a technique. So what I did was I was like, okay, so they can decide. The person who you're attacking can decide to either just take one of their effort dice and just discard it, as you just kind of like, you have this, basically you have like a feint kind of thing, and they have to put some attention and effort into making certain they can complete their defense. So that gives it a cost whenever you attack them. You tear one of those off. Or alternatively, they lose 1d10 defense. So they roll a d10 and subtract that from their defense, which is kind of the same thing as you adding it directly to your offense. But I thought that was really interesting. And because it gives them the trade-off, they're the one who gets to kind of decide, like, okay, well, should I use a good set and then roll a die and then potentially have a much worse set? Should I use a crummy set to begin with and then effectively give him more damage? Or should I use a set that's appropriate and also lose an effort die? So I liked that decision point a lot. It made that kind of lower rank strike still kind of come with this interesting element to it. And I don't... Like, I'll need to... One of the important things to do whenever you're designing a big game like this with lots of different kung fu moves or techniques or whatever you want to call them, is that you need to benchmark them against comparable techniques and make sure you don't undercost them. I failed to do that in a few places in the core book. Like, for example, I was noticing this when I was putting together Blood from God's Eye, that the multi-attack expert level technique that the Emerald Kairin have is just hands down better than the exact same technique that the Golden Lions have. And the reason for that is that the Lions are the first one designed, and I didn't really go back and revisit that and, like, fluff it up in light of all the new techniques. So all the really basic stuff with the brand new kind of style, design style I was using, that's all Golden Lions. And their stuff is pretty good, but like it starts to creak a little bit when you compare it to the later styles I designed. The Emerald Kairin were the very last style I designed. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, what have I got for these guys? And I was trying to really do some creative stuff with them. So I was having to get more creative as the styles went on, because I couldn't just rely on the basic tricks of how I was designing anymore, and I had to think a little more creatively. And now that I've got 14 styles under my belt, plus all of the styles I had to do for Packers, now I kind of get how these things work. So, yeah, benchmarking is really important, and you should always benchmark against your earlier design. So, as of now, unfortunately, the Golden Lions are left a little bit in the dust. At least their sword style is. It's not bad, it's just really, really, really basic. It's like basically the first style I tried to do. Some of the radioactive scorpions are like that too. Like their gun style, a little bit basic. It's not awful. The Eat Man stuff that comes in later, I think, spices it up nicely. But like, yeah, the expert level techniques in that they're a little basic. Honestly, most of the styles in the core book, especially the early ones, all kind of have that sort of basicness to them. That's not bad. Honestly, I think it's probably solid design not to over-design them. But the Golden Lions, unfortunately, because I designed later techniques that kind of did the same thing that they did, and I hadn't fully worked out all the kinks by the time I was designing the Lions, later on I could be more bold with my design. And so yeah, unfortunately they got left a little bit in the dust. It's not a completely incomparable like a difference in balance, but it's imbalanced enough that if I were going to do a redraft of it, I would probably spice up the Lion style just a little bit, especially their expert level techniques. I feel like at least their multi-attack technique needs something to recommend it. It's not awful. It's actually a pretty solid technique. It just needs a little bit more. I don't know what I would do with it. Something cool. Maybe I'd make it inspire people. You know, just give it like some kind of alternative thing that it does that gives it some punch. But yeah, so with that particular move, because it's going into kind of new design territory, I want to see what moves I've done previously that I can benchmark that one again. And for me, my benchmark is going to be the 14 core styles in the core book. The ones that backers made were benchmarked against those 14 styles, and I feel like that curbed them down to a really good place where they were creative and did really unique things. A lot of those styles are exceptionally cool, for the record. If you haven't checked out the Apocalypse Apocrypha in the core book, do yourself a favor. Some of the most interesting ideas in the book are not mine. They came from backers who paid to have them put in there, and those backers did incredible stuff. But the thing about those techniques is that I don't want to benchmark other things against those. With the benchmark, I feel like the best practice, and this is intuition here. I can't really like take you down exactly why my thought process is this way, but bear with me. I think for clarity's sake, you don't want to make a copy of a copy. What you want to do is you want to make a copy and then use that master to make additional copies. Same thing with benchmarking. You want to benchmark against the same set of moves, and not benchmark against those moves and then benchmark against the thing you benchmarked. I think that as you continue to remove, then you're going to have things mutate too much. And although that might be appropriate for this supplement because there's a lot of cool mutations and what have you in it, I don't want to veer too far away from the core book's Kung Fu. Even if I'm turning you into a demon city, I still want there to be a reasonable benchmarking in power. Because when you get right down to it, if there were a supreme move in the core book, which was you turn into landscape, it would look like the one in the Ravana teaser right now. It would. That's the first time I ever designed one of those. And it's like its trade-offs are pretty good, right? You kind of get a selective immortality, but it limits your actions to the landscape that you occupy. And you can, like, break off from that, but not in a way that's quite as meaningful as having your body anymore. So I think that's an interesting power. It's definitely a power, right? It makes you much, much harder to kill, and it gives you the ability to spread your influence in a way that no other character without that power can. So I think that's really powerful. But in terms of, like, comparing it to some of the other Supremes, which give you, like, you know, soul-poisoning venom or, like, a straight-up nuclear bomb, you know, I'm looking at the other Supremes and I'm like, you know, it's comparable. It's weird and wacky enough and powerful enough to just be kind of just comparable in general. I wouldn't say it makes you more powerful than those things. It makes you similarly weirdly powerful. Oh, sorry, it's late for me here. I'm so excited about the Kickstarter. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. I've got all these guys blocked out. I've got Yamato no Orochi, the 8-headed serpent god. I've got good old Yama. All of you who love Dragon Ball Z know that King Yama is a big red guy in a suit, and that's exactly how he appears in this game. No notes. Vritra, the Acid Dragon. You will note, if you are a complete irredeemable nerd, that they already are something called Vritra in the game, Acid Vritra. At the time I wrote those in, I didn't realize that Vritra was, like, not just a dragon, but, like, the dragon of Indian myth. He's this big, like, kind of like an ice dragon thing that, like, turned everything into glaciers. He's a big deal. He is the equivalent of Yarmoongander, so, like, he's a big, nasty snake dragon thing. So, I'm not gonna retcon that those things are called Acid Vritra. I just said that, like, oh yeah, these things are totally spawned by him. That's why they have his name. And moving on. Because people get to make mistakes. Deal with it. Alright, so, I got Shootin' Joji, who is big old red Oni guy. I have, I was playing Void Stranger, so I was trying to do some very basic puzzle solving there. I got so close on this one that I had to look up the solution, and I was mad because when I saw it, I was like, I just gotta fall. Anyway, I've got Changchi, who, oh my god, if you haven't looked up the Chinese myth of Changchi, this thing is awesome. It's this shapeshifter thing, and it's generally invisible, and what it'll do is it'll look at people debating important things, and it'll find the most virtuous person who's the most persuasive, and it'll go up to him invisible and bite his tongue out, and it'll like pop, and it'll be like coated in blood, and it'll find the most like sinful, awful, persuasive person there. It'll be like still coated in the tongue blood of the guy that it mutilated. It'll be like, hey, I'd like to be your advisor, and you can't get a more scathing critique, right, of like sort of like the sort of social climber sort of people that just bring ruin and chaos wherever they go. So that's what Changchi is all about. This guy is stuff that Jordan Peterson always warns about. This raw chaos, and I love him so much. Was that all of them? Jesus, I feel like I was designing more. There's 7 total, so I guess that's all of them. Yeah. Yamato no Orochi is going to be really fun, too. I'm basing a lot of his visual aesthetic off of Sekhmet from the Ronin Warriors. And I gotta tell you, that guy went hard. Absolutely hard. Also, I misremembered his voice. I started watching those episodes again. I misremembered. I thought he had like a snaky, like serpent voice, like kind of like Starscream from Transformers. Nah, dude. He has this super beast voice. He's like, "It is I, Sekhmet. You will die, Ronin warriors." it is intense. So whoever they got as a voice actor there didn't need to go that hard. And man, I love you for it. Oh, and Shambara, that's the other guy. Okay, Shambara was an asshole. Whereas Chang'e was really easy for me to design, very intuitive, because he's got themes around mutation and oceans and shape-shifting and like pandemonium and chaos. Like all that stuff lends itself to design, right? You can do some really fun, wacky stuff with that. Shambara was different. Shambara is all about fate and being trapped and getting control of situations and getting more information and like he's like a religion kind of guy and he's got fate stuff and he was just like conceptually he was weird and awkward and trying to get something cohesive out of his design was like trying to think through concrete. I eventually did it. I'm very, very pleased with what I got for him eventually. Because I leaned into the parts of those disparate themes that had some overlap in their Venn diagrams. So, and that was the thing. So, like, a desert, religion, fate, and eyeball monster, like, those are some really very different very different circles, right? So there's only a couple of places where they just barely overlap, like thematically or physically or like strategically. And strategically was the big thing with this because like these techniques all have to cohere into a style which lends itself to a battle strategy. Like that's really important in the design. So Jesus God, that was very, very difficult with him. So he was the hardest by a pretty. You'll note he's Mark III. I did 2 other versions of this. It took me a whole day to get this page. So y'all better be real. Like that was a day of my life. All right, that was one of my few days off that I get when I'm not working my bones off. So yeah, okay. So there's that. I've been talking for 20 minutes. Jesus Lord. Okay. That's enough for today. I just wanted you to know how hard I was working. The next step is actually, I actually have shifted this whole document into Affinity, so I'm doing layout with it right now. And I'm going to do a lot of the primary writing in Affinity, and I'm just going to port it back into the living playtest document, the living alpha, because like, it's just more convenient for me that way. That way I've got that step of layout done, and the layout's really nice. I already did layout for how many hundreds? It was 500. It was a lot. It was a ton of pages for Lone Wolf Fist, and I made some mistakes in that one. Like the text is a little bit too small, and a few other things, and I didn't have the document set up beforehand with the specifications for print. So by the time I'd released the PDF, I realized a lot of my mistakes, and I had to go into this ridiculously huge, ill-formatted document and basically reformat the whole thing a second time. I'm not doing that this time. The PDF is formatted with the exact same specifications that the print on demand needs to be specified to. So it's already done. I don't have to worry about that now. Lesson learned. And the reason I did that was to save time and effort. So now I can just focus on actually writing these techniques, which is the next part. I'm going to be doing techniques for the remaining 6 Asura for the next, God, however long it takes. Once they're done, I've got a few more things I want to do in Hell. I want to dwell in Hell a little bit longer. I also wrote out the names and a brief description of all the landscapes in Hell, and I've also got all the names of all the different demons that live in Hell, which are unique to Hell. And I would really like to write some stuff into it that gives you a reason to go there and like be there, because at least 2 of the different clans. At least 2 of them can pretty routinely go in there. Obviously, the Shadow Vipers, right, are going to be able to go in there because that's their whole thing is demonology. But also the Radioactive Scorpions because they have a ancestral claim to being in Hell. Ravana, the king of Hell, the guy who's in charge of the whole shebang, isn't just the creator of the Rakshasa, he's their granddaddy. Like, those are his kids. So if you're descended from the Rakshasa, which all of the radioactive scorpions are, then you're related to the king of hell. So you have a claim to just go there and be there, and you're not like royalty, but I mean you're in the family, like, so there's some deference there, and I think that's fun, and I would be interested to see, like, okay, so any place where there's an open gaping gateway to hell, and there's plenty of those in the world of Ashes and Ghosts, the radioactive scorpions would be like, oh holy shit, we ought to go to my pad and party, my pad that I have in hell. You guys have been to hell, right? That's cool, you know, like that's pretty unique to the setting. So I'm interested in exploring what that would be like. I'm also interested in if you just wanted to run a setting, like a game just set in hell. I feel like you could do that in Exalted. You know, between the Infernals book and between the Compass of Celestial Directions, Malpheus, and whatever other info you wanted to bring into that, like, I feel like there's enough where you could set a campaign in hell. And I know that to be the case because I did. The first arc of one of my campaigns was literally called Exalted in Hell, and I just had a bunch of Solars get shanghaied and go to hell. Now, keep in mind, you aren't trapped in hell technically as an Exalt. You can just leave. Hell is for demons and well, not even for hell, is even for demons. Hell is just for the Yozis. Like, they can't escape. They don't let demons escape, but they technically can't keep you from just leaving. You can just walk out through Cecilene whenever you want. It takes 5 days, period, dot, and you're out of there. Thankfully, you don't have to tell players that, so they got stuck. So that was a nasty bit of work. Also, the geography of hell is such that it isn't necessarily easy to get to Cecilene. So if you're in the middle of a layer of Malpheus, it can be as big as a continent in every direction around you. So yeah, when you get out of that city, sure, then you can go to Cecilene and just walk out when you get out of the city. So they stayed in there for a good long while. And by the way, I had Autochthonia, instead of it invading creation, it invaded Malpheus. Because I don't remember what it was called, the module they used to breach the Seal of 8 Divinities. But I thought it would be really fun if, in addition to that, there was some alternative research being done into a charm called the God Sibling Sympathy Engine that just brought an Autochthonian city into Malpheus. And so I did. And I had this scene where there's like these plates that Malpheus has where it's like city on top, city on bottom, and it'll squish into each other. I think it's called a stone rain. And the city that was there, which is an alchemical, by the way, because cities are made out of Exalted in Autochthonia, was just like, you know what? We're not going to let that happen this time. So it's crushing down. It just takes its hands and goes, boop. And it doesn't happen. It raises the roof. And that was a really fun moment. So again, I just had to kind of narrate that because the actual charms that allowed you to operate on that scale and the actual consequences of how to do that squish in terms of like the will of Malpheus making it happen, they don't exist. They've never and probably will never exist until I write them, for the record. And I'm doing it. I've already done more for the design of Infernals than the designers of Infernals ever did. So, you know, you just wait a couple months, guys. We'll have the Kickstarter going, and if you really want to port my system over to EX3, how hard could it be? That game's super abstract. You can find a way. I believe in you. I don't care what you do with it. Just give me your money, bro. Anyway, we're at the half-hour mark. I'm doing Babel Kiminar after the Hell section, but I'm interested in making enough setting stuff that you guys can, if you want to just set a campaign with squabbling damned heroes using the power of the Asura while in Hell, I want that to be a thing you can do. So I'm debating whether I want to do that like Chronicles of Amber style, or if I want to go some other direction with it. I'll probably just do it Chronicle of Amber style. It'll be fun. Feuding nobles, that's always great. Okay, that's our half an hour. Thank you for your time. I'm going to get back to writing. Goodbye.